quick question. Fantasy football, what is your New Year's resolution? Your fantasy football New Year's resolution. How are you going to change? I mean, Jason, I know in our league of record you won, so your resolution might be.
Change nothing.
There you go.
You change nothing and you die.
No, I've got my change. I got my resolution.
Who wants to go first?
I will go first, and I resolve to hold the higher upside running backs, the backup running backs. I'm going to hold them longer.
Now, that was already something you tried to do with the Ryan Matthews of the world.
It's very difficult to hold these guys until fruition. I was able to do it 2 years ago with Jeremy Hill. I held him all year long, and it paid off huge. And this year, I mean, I had David Johnson in a couple spots. I had him available in other spots, but I just didn't hold on to him and paid the price when it came to the waiver time. I think I only had him on my bench in one of the leagues, and then it was, could I afford him? Similar thing with D'Angelo Williams. We saw the first 2 games. We literally saw it. There was no speculation of what D'Angelo Williams can do in that offense. We saw it for 2 games, and yet I wasn't holding on to him in the leagues where I didn't have Le'Veon, which was just a mistake. We talked about it in our league of record. There was a guy in our league who every Sunday would add him to his bench, and somehow I didn't even notice it because he's not announcing he's doing this, but it's so smart of him to do. If you have a wasted bench spot, throw a really high upside running back on there, and because you never know. I mean, especially this year with all the injuries.
So I'll piggyback on that. That's a good resolution. My resolution is this, and every time I had momentum this year, I kind of got punched in the face a little bit. And so my New Year's resolution is to become better at depth on my team. I have always been a fantasy player that has prioritized elite starters over depth on my team. But whether it was Dion Lewis, John Stewart late in the year, my Rawls injury, Arian Foster, my team at times looked amazing.
I'm not sure
right?
you can more depth than that. I mean, that's 4 RB1s.
Well, no, that wasn't depth. That was reaction, right?
Yeah,
like I had guys, then I had to go get others, then I had to go get others. What I'm saying is by the end of the year, despite having that levels of depth, it's more proving the point. I still had to start some bad running backs in the playoffs. So piggybacking off of you've always said this, and I don't know if I bought into it in the beginning, but just at the end of the day, whether they're good or not, you always say, have a couple extra running backs on your bench. I didn't do that enough this year. I've always been, like I said, elite at every starting position and roll the dice. I think in the modern NFL, rolling the dice anymore is probably foolish. It's probably really, really hoping to get lucky without the injuries. Mm-hmm. Whereas before, I think the odds were a little bit better, but now, too many guys went down.
We talked about that heading into the playoffs this last year. You had a better group of starters, and I had more depth.
And we thought that would go head-to-head.
We both dealt with injuries. Mark Ingram went down for me.
Stewart and
Rawls for you, and I had the depth to kind of roll in there. When Alshon Jeffrey was out,
you had another wide receiver that could step up.
I had somebody to go in. For me, my New Year's resolution looking ahead to 2016 is to value the high-end elite wide receivers higher than good running backs for me. I have always been a super running back guy. I'm going to take, a Lamar Miller this year over a good wide receiver because I can get wide receivers. I can get them late in the draft. I can get them off of waivers. And I think that's right when you're talking about your average wide receivers. But when you're talking about the high-end wide receivers, I think it's starting to really just be proven that they are safer than the running backs. You did some work, Mike, on like the safety of quarterbacks and different positions, the bust factor of how many of these top guys are busting. This year, man alive, if you took a running back in that first round, chances are
not named Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, chances are you got screwed over.
We got a listener email me this morning. They'd survived spending half their auction money on 2 players, Eddie Lacy and C.J. Anderson. Half their auction money.
Wow.
They won the title.
Wow.
But that serves your point. All this money thrown into those running backs that went down.
Yeah, and if you look at the early wide receivers that went, I mean, you have Dez that went down. That was a bust.
Jordy.
And well, Jordy,
If you drafted too early.
super early. But I would say of the top guys, the only
Right.
two would be Dez, and then Demaryius Thomas was a little bit of a letdown,
Uh,
but he was
AJ
still okay.
AJ Green was probably – I didn't own him personally, so I didn't have that roller coaster. I was just watching from afar, but I would guess
I had AJ Green on
that people were disappointed with Green.
It will be something we talk about in depth this
Yeah.
offseason because this is something that, Mike, you brought up as one of the trends you're expecting to see because of the injuries this year, right?
Yeah, the trend is I think people are going to go wide receiver heavy in the first round, and I haven't. I mean, we still have plenty of time. For me, I want to start breaking down some data and all those things before I make a decision on am I going to join that or am I going to zag because everyone's zigging, and grab the best running back available.
Better value at running backs then.
But that's it. I agree with Jason that it's going to be very interesting for us to examine. Do you just go wide receiver? Do you punt running back for a couple rounds and see what happens?
Jason read me his MFL 10 roster this morning, one of the leagues he won, which was impressive in and of itself, but it was dominated by high-end wide receiver play, and a bunch of injured running backs were on his team.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to wonder, like, people read me their running back lists on those teams or their fantasy rosters, and they're like, man, I got a bunch of bad breaks. But everybody's saying that.
Right.
It's not just like I'm starting to say, oh, okay, everybody dealt with running back injuries this year. So very interesting. We will, as Mike said, we will be looking at all the data and looking at the trends and seeing where we're headed in 2016 because things change. Some things stay the same. I think late-round quarterbacks are going to stay the same.
And I have a big – I guess it's not big. That's overstating it. Apparently, there was a D'Angelo Williams stat correction. And we are getting tweets that people have had their championship revoked because
Wow.
of a D'Angelo Williams stat correction. So a shout out to our fallen comrades who have lost their title to the stat correction. That is a bad beat.
That's terrible.
We feel it. I've never had a title revoked that way. I have had my entrance into a title game revoked that way. It is brutal. I understand your pain. And
what it looks like is D'Angelo Williams had a fumble and a fumble lost point added. So if you're in a league that penalizes both of those, basically a fumble happened. A fumble lost was credited to D'Angelo Williams.
Ugh. So if you, oh man,
So that is
brutal.
that is
Brutal.
tough. Yeah, I've had a few stories. There was a Denard Robinson stat correction that Yahoo did not credit ahead of time and then put the responsibility on the owners.
Theirs was even worse though because this D'Angelo Williams was on this week, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you expect stat corrections today. If I'm up by 1 point and I get stat corrected, I'm waiting till today when that's normal. But the one with the Yahoo and the Denard Robinson was over a week old, and they went back.
Well, it wasn't really Yahoo though. It was the NFL changed it.
Right.
And Yahoo maybe didn't apply it as soon as they could have. I mean, they applied it on Friday, I think, before the weekend games, but Friday was Christmas. So that's what got in the way for a lot of league owners, and they didn't do it in a way that automatically applied it like ESPN did. They said, hey, we don't want to mess with your team. You go mess with it. It was 13 yards of rushing yards for Denard Robinson that got changed. So that stuff is no fun. I still say if he got 13 yards, he got 13 yards. I've been on the side where you change it because –
It's
he
the
did.
truth.
I mean, it's the truth. So, but it doesn't make it feel any better.